Hi, everyone. Welcome to La Lista, a LatinX writers podcast. I am your host, Ruben Mendive, and today we have a new writer here. All right, so I start every podcast with having the guest introduce themselves. So, what's your name, how you identify, and sort of a little bit what you're about?
Oh, thank you, Ruben. My name is Rosa Navarrete, and I guess my gender pronouns are she, hers. And then you did ask one sentence about myself, and I wrote it because I was like, what do I say? So I wrote, I'm Rosa Navarrete, daughter of Luis Navarrete and Rosa Moreno, Peruana writer raised in Los Angeles.
So the first question I always ask everybody is, where are you from? So where are you from? Where's your family from?
So my family is originally from Peru. My dad's from Trujillo, and my mom is from Lima, La Costa. And they met in the 80s, and he was his math tutor for my mom. And she, fell in love with him, he fell in love with her. And then I happened. He dropped out of college. He was going to San Marcos to raise a family. And then I came into the world in 1984. My father then decided to come to the States. He did it, undocumented, across the border with his side of the family. And then my mom joined with me and my sister and a friend named Lupe in 1989. It was summertime around July, and we met up with my dad then.
That's interesting. I didn't know that your whole family was from Peru. Like, what do you know about, your family's life, your family's story in Peru before you guys came over here?
Yeah, I really actually didn't know much about the story. I'm collecting stories now from my grandfather, and my grandmother just passed in 2015. It's like still a fresh wound, I guess. I think her departure enabled me to kind of go back to the arts, go back to writing full force. But I'm collecting stories right now with my family. Most of what I know is, fun stories of música, el cajón, playing, dancing in the living room, having fun. And then there's also tragic things that happen in Latin America was very common in the 80s, abuse, and especially against the wife sometimes. And thankfully, my family outgrew all of that, but that was part of my history. I know for a fact, what I can state for sure is that I come from a family of survivors. My grandfather was a con man, just to say it in a nice way. Yes. He was a salesman, on paper, but that's how he met my grandmother. He was pretending to sell land around her parents' home, and he saw her and fell in love. And my grandmother was just this really kind spirit, sister of 9 people, and then on my father's side, my grandfather, actually he was a writer and a baker, and he was really well known for his poetry, but in the small circles of community. He was really well known in Mirones Bajo for his bakery, his baking and his bread, and now my uncles have, the bakery has passed on to my uncle, so they're still baking down in Mirones Bajo. We have a bakery there. That's family owned. Yeah.
Do you know what sort of, you mentioned that you were born, your dad dropped out of college. Do you know what prompted the move to the States for him?
Yeah, it was definitely survival. I believe at that time the government was giving out rations of food, so people would line up and get bags of rice, beans. I mean, even though he was aware, or not aware probably, because at the time he was young and going through his own personal journey, he saw, he had 2 daughters, and he saw the way women were treated in Peru in general, and he didn't like it, so he moved to the States to give us a chance to not be part of that. And then Peru has changed a lot since the 80s, for the better, I would say. It still has a long way to go. Of course, a lot of Latin American countries are corrupt, but it was
Mhm.
definitely, part of that unfortunate cycle of corruption. But it has improved a lot. But that is the reason why my father was like, I need to get out of here, and then I need to bring my family over.
Yeah. And do you know what his journey was like to make it to the US and like how he got settled in at first?
I know bits and pieces. That's another thing I'm collecting. I think my
Hmm.
parents are slowly opening up to me now that I'm in my 30s, and now that
Hmm.
especially I'm a mom, a recent mom. But for a long time, they were, I don't want to talk about that. That's ancient history. Let's think
Hmm.
about the present. Let's move forward. A lot of immigrant families say that. But I know that he wasn't supposed to go. He was asking his sister, my auntie, to please join the caravan of family. And the only reason he was allowed to go was because someone dropped out, who was going to be pretty much like the security of her married side of the family. And that's how he got involved in the trip, and that's how his journey began. And I believe that somehow they got a little lucky and they used the train, but they actually rode the train into a station, and then it's all blurry from me there. I'm still collecting
Hmm.
internally.
Yeah, and yeah, I think that's such a like common experience, especially with immigrants, of like only looking forward, not really worried about the past, not wanting to talk about it. And I think it's important to know our stories, just to know our histories, but it's not easy.
No, it's not. And I remember traveling with my mom, but my story is just glimpses of really intense images that I've actually written about.
Hmm.
There's a piece I wrote, like a little cantos essay piece called "We Were Animals." That was kind of my experience, and I wrote it from a little girl's point of view because I was 5 at the time.
Hmm.
Um, when my mom was younger and I would bring up these memories, she said, "Oh yeah, that happened to us." But now that she's getting older, I bring up these memories, and she said, "I don't know what you're talking about." So
Hmm.
it's kind of interesting. And part of me is like, "Oh Lord, are you purposely forgetting, or are you just yeah, or age, and just wanting to
Yeah.
about it?"
Yeah, and I'm sure it's like not easy for a parent to hear that their 5-year-old remembers like that
Yeah,
journey.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting, because I also came to this country at a young age. Um, but I don't have any memories of like, well, we got on a plane first of all, so it's not that memorable of a trip. Um,
Oh, we did
but
too. We flew into Panama, and then
oh,
from there
cool.
it was like on foot with like asking for rides and favors, and yeah.
Was the plan always for you to join your father in the U.S., or was he just gonna send money back?
I think the plan was to send money back,
Mm-hmm.
and it was probably about a year in. What happened was I also wrote a short about this, a short story. It's never been published. I have to work on it, but my sister, uh, when she was 3, so we had like plywoods on the roof of my grandmother's house, and she would grab them and she would make crosses, so like overlap them.
Mm-hmm.
And for a while, my mom thought that she was making that cross, that she was like super religious, and she was like, "Ay, hijita," like quiero Dios and all that. But then she would spend more time with us on the roof, and we would play there, and she would see my sister get on the cross, and then she would make this airplane sound, like, shoo, shoo.
Mm-hmm.
And then when airplanes would fly over the house, my sister would yell, "Mi papá, mi papá, mi papá." And my mom would be like, I think that's what she told me. She said, I think the one time when I realized I needed to reunite us was when I heard her yell to a plane, "Mi papá, mi papá." Because
Yeah.
she always thought the plane had my dad for some reason.
That's an interesting perspective, and I'm glad that you like wrote something about it because yeah, it's like we know the story about the father that leaves to another country to send back money, providing for his family, but then it's like the dad's by himself in another country, and the family left behind, sort of, and your mom sort of being like, yeah, he's doing this for us, but like they still miss him, like
Yeah. She became a
yeah.
complete matriarch. and was like,
Yeah.
okay, I need to do something about this because my little
Yeah.
daughter playing husband her dad, And my
Yeah.
family has this because we've been through so much, and I'm sure you can attest to this for yourself, but we have a twisted sense of humor because of all the stuff we've been through. So
Yeah.
at the time, mi papa, mi papa, when we talk about it and we're in the feels, we cry and we remember, but there are times when we remember that story and we start laughing hysterically and we're like, oh my god, Jackie, you're so dumb,
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Totally.
it's something that we do, We're either really sad about it or it's like, oh my god, remember when you were so dumb?
Yeah. That's
She's a little girl.
hilarious.
It's a sweet story. Yeah.
Um, and and so, like, what did your dad do for a living here in the U.S.? What? Because I always ask this. So, like, what did he do when he first got here? What sort of has been his jobs?
Oh Lord, my dad has done it all. He first worked for Torito. He was a cleaning person for Torito. And so was my uncle and who had traveled with him and a lot of the family members. And then he started working for KFC, and they noticed that he was a really good handyman, so they asked him to paint and do some fixes around the restaurant. And then this guy who owned a bunch of KFC chains was like, man, you're awesome. So then he sent my dad to Arizona, and I have a vivid memory of being in Arizona with my dad and my mom and my sister. And I don't know if you know this, but back then in the early 90s, the laws for seatbelts and they weren't really that enforced. So my sister and I would ride in the bed of the truck sometimes, so like
Oh
as little
yeah.
kids, and we would, as long as he was driving safely, we were just there. And I just remember like sleeping on the bed of the truck and looking at the stars and being like, "Whoa, my dad works for KFC, and we get to sleep under the stars." So he did that for a while. He's actually responsible for the KFC that's on Virgil and Silver Lake. It's right where Don Felix is, serendipitously, the Peruvian restaurant. It's Don Felix, my favorite place, because I grew up with Don Felix, like eating and going to his place. And also my dad helped build the plaza across the way. So he got into construction eventually. And he's been doing that for years. He became a construction supervisor in his 50s. And he's just going at it, ready to retire, but he's still going at it.
I want to ask the same for your mom. Like, and also to like piggyback off of that, like, where did you guys end up settling? Once you were reunited.
We ended up settling in downtown Los Angeles. We
Mm-hmm.
lived for a few years, I think a year and a half on Sunset in this brick apartment. And then we also lived somewhere in downtown LA, and I always forget the name of the street. My mom, every time I ask her, she's like, oh, I don't remember, but I know she does.
Mm-hmm.
What happened was actually when we first reunited with my dad, he brought us to a relative's house, and then there was a tiff of some sort and a
Mm-hmm.
disagreement, and we had to leave. So for a few days, my dad, my mom, myself, and my sister were, and I wrote a spoken word piece about this at Alex Alfaro's. Well, if you interviewed, he did a
Yeah.
digital word workshop. I wrote a piece about it there in his class. It was really cool. He's a great teacher. And it was a time when we were living out of my dad's truck pretty much for a little bit. And we collected cans and bottles and anything to get like the money, for
Mm-hmm.
food. And then we found out about Salvation Army. So we eventually settled. The first time I think we had like a space to ourselves was Salvation Army in downtown LA. And I got my first toys there, like American toys.
Yeah.
Barbies and books, and it was really cool. We'd have like at night we'd have people read books to us through the loudspeaker, so all the kids would get free books from whatever or whoever donated them, and we would all go in the
Mm-hmm.
hall, lay on the ground, and read the pages together. And that's
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah. And so, what did your mom do for work? Well,
My mom, my mom cleaned houses for a while, and then she just became her own boss, doing her own thing. She went to cosmetology school and
mm-hmm.
just started working like word of mouth. And yeah, she's just a hustler. And
Yeah.
that's how she survives. And I ask her all the time, are you ready to retire? And she's like, no, I like my money.
Yeah.
She's a funny, well, she comes from my grandpa who's like a salesperson. So And they're very good, actually. I've learned a lot of marketing techniques from my mom because she loves people and she loves talking to people and engaging with them. And the sell part is like a plus, but it's actually, she's just a very social person.
Mm-hmm. And so yeah, so I want to like move forward a little bit. So like, so like, where did you go to school? Like, you know, where did you grow up? What was your neighborhood like? You know?
Oh wow. The only school I remember in downtown LA that I attended was Presencia, and I experienced like my first earthquake there, and my first bully. I had a kid who would chase me after school, a little boy, and I used to have really long hair, and he would pull my hair, and I would always fall down the stairs. And then my mom's like, "He likes you," and I'm like, "That's not a way to tell a person you like them."
Wow.
He was mean. It was a long time ago. Where else did I go to school? Let me think. Jeez. Langdon Elementary. Eventually moved to the San Fernando Valley, Van Nuys. That was a memorable space for me because that's when I transitioned out of ESL into English speaking classes. And then I ended up, then my family, oh yeah, I went to Van Nuys Middle School after that and to the magnet program because they found out that I taught myself to read and also that I was really good at math and science. Did that program, and then my dad at that time and my mom separated, and he remarried a woman from Chicago with Irish background. And he had 2 kids from Mississippi, imagínate, and Willie Staff, my ex-stepmom, they're not together anymore, Debbie.
Yeah.
And she taught me kind of to love books on a different level, which was really cool. She was an English major when she went to school. But because my dad married Debbie, we were able to go back to Peru and fix our papers. So we self-deported. Unfortunately, in doing so, it didn't include my mom in the process.
Yeah.
My mom's okay now, but at that time, that was really hard having to leave my mom behind. And I was 12 years old. We self-deported back to Peru. Fixed our papers, and then I came back for high school. Like a person from another country all over again.
Yeah. And so like, you know, you say you went back to Peru to like, like dot the I's, cross the T's.
Yeah.
So how long was that process, you know?
It was 2.5 years.
Oh my God.
And my dad tried to get some architecture, construction work over there, but it's still an ageist kind of a country. So they didn't see, a skill for him. They were like, no, you're too old. So my dad is actually responsible for reopening our family's bakery, and that's what we ended up doing. Yeah. So we lived in UC at first, which is kind of like a nice area, quote unquote, not the nicest, but nice. And then we moved to Miramesbajo, which is like low middle class. That's where my family's from. So we went back there. My dad reopened the bakery, and we made our living selling bread.
Yeah. How old were you at this time?
I was 12, 13. Okay. Yeah, it was my birthday's in a strange place because it was 2.5 years, but somehow I came back when I was 15 years old. Yeah.
Got it. Yeah, so you're like a tween, teen. So your dad gets remarried, you have 2 step siblings now.
They go to Peru with us, by the way.
Yeah. And then you move to Peru, leave your mom.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. And like, you've been living in the US, then you go back to Peru. Was there like a culture shock? Was it like, were you like getting flashbacks to a life you like remembered from before?
Yeah, it was beautiful. It was beautiful in that I was getting memories back and things that looked super huge to me. Like my uncle's house was a mansion in my memories, and then I went there and I was like, oh, it's a regular house.
Yeah.
That was really cool. But I also, looking like, if I'm to reflect on it now as an adult, I think when I went back to Peru, I was super excited to see familia. Everyone was excited to have like a white lady in the family because now like, oh, now we can learn to speak English and we can help or find our way to the States. And my stepbrother and stepsister, who were Caucasian, also got a lot of attention in the neighborhoods that we lived in because they were like anomalies, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But I think what the culture shock aspect was kind of the girl power. Uh, and you know, I was raised in the States in the 90s, so I was raised around like Smashing Pumpkins and the Cranberries, and I just saw a lot of badass women and all the
Mm-hmm.
time.
Spice
TLC,
Girls.
Spice, yeah, even Spice Girls, which was more of my stepsister's thing, but yeah, even
Yeah.
them, they were fun and free. So I went back to Peru, and there were some things about the girls who were like, I can't do that, or I won't do that. That's the
Mm.
boys' or the boy has to come to you. You can't go to them, and or you can't say that, or you can't wear this. If you know open your legs like that, that's my middle name. You know they're gonna think that you're easy, and I was like, really, it's really hot. Like I need to spread my legs right now. You know what you're talking about, yeah. But that was a culture shock. I think that's when I realized why my mom and dad made the trip
Mm.
is because
Yeah.
I was able to think outside of those parameters. But
Yeah.
again, reflecting back on it now as an adult woman, I'm like, wow, what privilege I had probably entering those spaces
Yeah.
and calling them out on it, but also like without any real sense of entering community. Like you are re-entering
Mm-hmm.
community that yeah you belong to once, but this talk of privilege and this thing that you survive on in the States is not necessarily going to work for the girls here. It could
Yeah.
be dangerous for them to speak out and be like, don't talk to me like that. You know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's interesting. I had like a similar thing. I had my grandmother died, so we went back to Mexico, and I was like 12, and it was sort of like the same experience. You're like, you recognize places from your memories, and it's like such a different perspective. Also, because you were so little, like I remember seeing this wall that I thought was 1,000 feet tall, and then be like, oh, it's not that tall.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then reconnecting with family and everything, but it is that thing where you're just like the American cousin. So it's like that weird thing where you're from there, you were a toddler there, you leave, you come back years later, and then it's like this weird middle area where you're no longer like fitting in there, but then it's like not like you were fitting in back in the U.S. either.
Yeah, and the only way I could describe it, I made a really sweet friend over there. Shout out to the Tira Moscoso. Te estoy mandando un saludo de Tira Moscoso. She was like my savior, a year younger than me, but she wanted to know how it felt, and I told her I feel happy, but and the only way I could describe it was like, this is the States and this is Peru, and if there were like a rainbow connecting both of them, or like a slide, I'm sitting in the middle of that slide, and I'm dangling my,
Yeah.
yeah, and I'm just
Yeah.
observing the world. It doesn't even feel like I'm part of them at times.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's so weird that at that age you're having sort of these like thoughts and perspectives about like your home countries.
Mm-hmm.
So I do want to ask, like, so your dad got remarried to this lady from Chicago.
Yeah.
Um, why, I don't, like, my family was a similar thing. My dad got remarried, and then through that, we were all able to get our green cards and eventual citizenship, but we didn't have to move back. Like, we were able to stay. Do you know, like, why you had to move back?
I believe what my dad said was it would have made the process faster.
Mm.
And I don't think it was the case in the end, but that was the idea that someone had advised him to do that, and it would be faster for us.
Mm-hmm.
And although it was really hard, I'm really grateful I had that moment in time, because it was hard being away from my mom, but it was also a little liberating, because she, even though brought me to the States to become this independent woman, she also had kind of these archaic rules about womanhood.
Mm-hmm.
So with my stepmom, who was raised in the States, I was 12. I was 12 and I had really hairy legs, and I was like, Debbie, we were like in Lince on our green bathtub, and I'm like, can I please shave my legs? And she's like, yes. And I'm like, because my mom's not here, and she's not going to get mad at me, and she can't do anything. And she's like, okay, cool.
Yeah.
I got to do my rebellion without having to rebel against anybody necessarily, because my dad was pretty open-minded, which was bittersweet, but it was great. And I had my first kiss in Peru, and I had my first boyfriend in Peru. And I saw a gang fight in Peru, 2 gang fights in Peru. I was dating a gang leader, didn't know until later on in our relationship. And then my first like movie date was in Peru, and it was so awkward. I took like my little sister because I was so nervous to date. So bad. But I have really fond memories. Actually, I've talked to my friends about this, and they're like, you need to do a series on Peru in the 90s and what happened to you. It's terrible.
Yeah, because it's that funny time where you're just like going on your first date, but it's also like bring your sister because it's like don't leave me alone with this boy.
Yeah, it's too much attention.
And you know, I've never been to Peru, so like, how would you describe it to somebody that's never been? Like, I know it's hard to like summarize a country, but like your experience of it, you know.
Oh, okay. I don't know if you remember the 90s Latin America like the music in the 90s was just like it was killing it. Even the cheesy stuff like La Macarena, it was just exploding everywhere.
Yeah.
Maria, Ricky Martin, yeah, it was just everywhere. So the best way I can describe my time in Peru was like walking into a Ricky Martin music video, not as fancy, I would say, because you know it's still a third world country.
Yeah.
But everywhere you walk, there was like, you know, Latin music, salsa. The doors were open, people were talking. The borracho was in the corner smoking a cigarette, and you know, telling the future and like. But you could see children buying beer, you know, like they would go into the store and buy beer, and it was okay because that's just there was no laws at the time, you know. And yeah, and like all the young kids, it was just vibrant. It was beachy. Everybody wanted to go to the beach. There was this big movement with Shakiras, which I know it's an artist name, but also in Peru they're like a necklace out of shells, and they're called Shakiras. They were huge. So there was kind of this surfer, salsa, like anything is possible vibe. And I'm speaking from like a tween teenager's perspective, not from my father's perspective, which I'm sure is different. Yeah. But it was a lot of fun, and it was like the Babysitter's Club, but Latino and borderline dangerous and exciting.
Yeah, that's cool. I can hear it now.
Yeah.
So let's talk about like, you know, you've sorted out los papeles, so you go back to the U.S. And so what's it like going back to the U.S. as a 15-year-old? Like, where did you guys settle? Like, what was it like sort of seeing your mom again also?
Yeah. So my mom remarried and was too shy to tell us. We found out, obviously. And we were introduced, literally the second day we came back, to my little brother, Joe, who's now like almost 20 years old. But we were introduced to him, and it was really sweet. I would say my mom was really sad during the process, like because she had to like introduce us into her life, her personal life, and she wanted to do it in person, not like over the phone. Yeah. So it was a little shocking from that perspective, but also we were all very patient, understanding that we had to go through that process. And it was through that marriage that my mom was able to, you know, become documented. But coming back as a teenager was really hard because I came from this like vibey, beachy, fun salsa, you know, and I was like, cool, you know, soy cool, like conozco a toda la gente, no soy fresa, da da da. There's a little Spanish language now that I understood and could speak it again. And then this other, like the high school was just super random and weird, and all of a sudden there's these cliques that I was like, what's a goth, and why are the architecture kids not hanging out with those kids? Like, it makes no sense to me, and, you know, why are the artists here and not with them, and why are the Latina girls called cholas? Like, I didn't understand that.
Yeah.
And why were people fighting each other? There were sometimes fights, between certain races, and I would watch from a distance. I didn't really belong anywhere. I think it was true in middle school too. I didn't really decide to sit with Latinas or decide to sit with like the nerds. I kind of floated. So I was kind of a fly in the wall for most of my educational life in the United States. I wasn't much of a participant, except my senior year in high school where I decided to do everything.
And what do you mean by everything?
I joined a academic club called the Knights and Ladies at Grover Cleveland High School.
Okay.
I got accepted to the Knights and Ladies because I sang a Britney Spears song and danced to a group of people who were like reviewing my application. Super random. I joined the drama. I did the Wiz. I was like in the drafting program. I was a Boeing job shadowing program for astronaut parts and spacecraft parts, and yeah, I was just in a lot of clubs and meeting a lot of people, and I think it was my desire to cling on to something cultural that I didn't really allow myself to blend into the first 2 years as a sophomore and junior. It was kind of more watching. And it was a lot of fun. I even got to travel, go to Kansas, and compete with Skills USA, like a nerdy job shadowing, kind of like a conference thing, and went to Kansas for that. So I did all those things just to meet people, and because I knew that college was happening, but it wasn't necessarily happening for me.
So what did you do after high school?
I think my counselor, this is super unclear to me to this day, submitted me to Cal State Northridge. And I don't think she ever invited me to have a conversation about, are there other options for someone as nerdy as me, like even if it was my last year of school that I became super active.
Yeah.
So I was invited to an orientation at Cal State Northridge, and I went right after high school, and it felt wrong. I felt like I was still in high school. I don't know why, but in my mind it was just like, this doesn't feel right. But thankfully, I got accepted to a nonprofit film school, and the summer right after I graduated, I got to work with inner city filmmakers, and organized by Fred Heinrich and Stefania Lipner through my film program in high school. And I became and I was introduced into screenwriting, editing, filming, producing, through that program.
And so, like, how did you even get into know that that's a school that was interesting to you, and also like now to be like in the film club in high school, like where did that come from?
Well, I love movies. I think the film and TV in general have been spaces for me to escape kind of what was happening around me when it was hard, or places for me to go for resources when I wanted to express myself a certain way. And I would sit with my sister and we would watch Happy Gilmore. And I'd be like, you see, like, the way he's saying it right now? Like, that's exactly what I felt like when blah, blah, blah happened. And for some reason, these visual things were easier for me to communicate rather than words out loud or the game itself. So when I heard I heard first about the animation program. I applied to that, and I was actually pretty good at it. I could have pursued it, but I didn't. And it was really fun. I got to know how to draw and how many sketches you do, and I made a short about a lady picking up a box with Mr. Katie. I wonder if he's still there. And then through that program, I learned about Miss Schubert, and she was the film program teacher. And she just was like, "Oh, hi, like, what do you like to do?" And I was like, "I don't know, I like to tell stories. I have a journal, but I'm just here." And she's like, "All right, so here's a camera, go do something." And she just gave me the camera. I love movies, especially I was a big geek for action films back in the day, so I made a little action film with some classmates. It was called Escape. It was really lame, but at the time it was really exciting. Because I could do stuff. Learn to edit on iMovie. So it was Miss Schubert actually who saw potential and referred me to Fred Heinrich, who was doing the program at a nearby school, and he was doing like an editing, teaching lesson program. So I went to meet him, and he was this really tall, daunting human being, and he was like, "What do you want to do a film for?" And honestly, had no idea what to say because I didn't know.
Mm-hmm.
I just said, I'm just here to see what my options are after high school. And, by the grace of God, he let me in. That's great.
Your parents, like, were they really like aware of like what you were going to do after high school? Like, what about this program? Like, do they have opinions about it?
No, I'm first generation because my dad dropped out and he had no idea what the process was here in the States.
Mm-hmm.
He just worked a lot. So he said, "You're done with high school." He was probably going to consult my tia, who eventually helped me to get into a junior college, about it, but not even neither of my parents were like, "Oh, like what's going to happen after." Now I just found out my mom did her best. She actually went to a college campus and was like, "What do I do?" to some people, but they never really helped, like fully
Mm-hmm.
committed to their questions. Um, so they were a little scared. They just know that they had to drive me to USC, like all the mornings, Monday through Friday, all through summer after high school. And yeah, my dad would ask me like, "What is this?" and "Why are we doing this?" and "What is this? What are you?" And I would just have
Mm-hmm.
to explain it's an avenue, and I'm trying to see if I can get work in the film and TV industry.
Yeah.
And always a lot of questions, but there was support. It wasn't like, "I'm
Yeah.
so excited for you." It was like,
Yeah.
"Glad you found something you like to do."
Yeah. And I think that's definitely speaks to a lot of like first generation students going to like post high school education. It's that it's sort of like you're on your own and not like in a oh poor you, but it's like you sort of just have to figure it out on your own. See, like, because also like all the information that's like supposedly available to you somehow never makes it to you. So you're constantly like 2 days behind on something you didn't even realize something existed, and you're just a kid trying to be like, I'm gonna enroll myself in this program. Let Can you drop me off? And then like, and you're
Yeah.
just figuring it out.
Yeah, and it's gotten better, but back in the late 90s, early 2000s when I was in school, yeah, communication was, it was a public school too, so it was very poor at the time
Hmm.
about the opportunities that were out there for people like me.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's just like, I don't know, it's also like a very immigrant experience. So, like, even like when your family first moved out here, and from my own experience, it's like you're really just on your own. It is like your family comes to another country, don't know the language, don't know any of the like
Mm-hmm.
traditions or like bureaucratic stuff. And it's just like, yeah, we'll figure it out. So, like, and then it's the same thing with you going into school. You just have to be like, no one's helping me. I don't have a roadmap. I just have to like
I'm just
see
gonna,
what.
yeah, walking forward and hopefully my feet land in the right place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, I think it's a lot of, and I think it speaks a lot to our parents who came here in the first place to be like, they fully leaped and then hoped that they would grab onto something.
Yeah.
And I feel like as their kids, we're constantly doing the same thing, being like, well, like we have that like tenacity in us to be like, well, I think this is a way forward. I'm gonna go for it, and God willing, something catches me, and I'm able to like make something of it.
Yeah. Or I meet an awesome human being who like
Yeah,
has complete like empathy towards whatever my experience is.
yeah, and and I think that's a part of like our experience. That's like you don't, since you're so on your own, like the smallest favors, the smallest chances, the things that are just by luck happen can like create such a bigger avenue for you to do something. Like, it's crazy how often we rely on the kindness of others or just like a chance encounter that can like really lift us up.
Yeah, absolutely. And I had a great mentor actually in high school who taught me the importance of volunteering and giving your time. And even though
Mm-hmm.
I don't have much, I didn't have much back then. Now I'm at least in a safe place. But volunteering like led me to other avenues too. So
Yeah.
put yourself out there as a helper, and then you never know who you meet. You know, who's going
Hmm.
to be next to you in a soup kitchen or at an event where you're helping to clean tables. You know, to
Yeah.
fundraise for some great cause, and yeah, those are all opportunities.
Yeah. And so, like, what came of you going to that like film program? You know, like, what did you come out when it ended? Like, what did you come away with?
Well, the great thing about inner city filmmakers is that once you graduate, if they feel that you are ready and focused and at least have a good grasp on one of the techniques, is they refer you to work.
Mm-hmm.
And the work is generally production assistant or office assistant, or you're at a desk at some executive's office, or you're like the second right hand person to the executive because you're still learning the
Mm-hmm.
ropes. Um, they just put you out there. So I did work with DreamWorks. I worked with Disney. I ended up actually meeting Univision, producer there, Lisa Fernandez, who now works for the doctors. Shout out to Lisa Fernandez. But she taught me so much. She was a producer for Control. It was a show, like an MTV-ish kind of show back in the days.
Mm-hmm.
And then those shows kind of closed down eventually. And I was PAing mostly for her. And then when she got to do Despierta America with Amelia Maquiavelo, I jumped in as an intern, stayed on as an associate producer or production assistant. Probably like, mostly like office work, I would say, like
Yeah.
organizing calls, making sure the interviewers were ready for us to show up with our cameras, stuff like that. And and then she referred me to some like reporter jobs, simple things where I would just hold the microphone and be like, "Por favor, la flaca," or
Oh yeah.
yeah, shows like that. Um,
Classics.
what's the Pio Rivera's sister, Jenny Rivera? I got to interview her once when she was coming into her niece's quinceañera. It was like a big thing. She was having a quinceañera in LA. So, but I didn't know much about them. You know, I didn't know they were so huge. I was just like Miss Peruanita,
Yeah.
middle of LA, trying to get to the interview. But so a lot of great things happened after ICF, and it wasn't until I went to DreamWorks and I worked with Color Force Inc. With Nina Jacobson's desk when I would look at Nina's resume, or I would listen into the conversations for writers because it was a development position, and I would read scripts. So scripts that I would love, I would I would hear them being passed. This it's not gonna. It's a great
Mm.
story, but are we gonna make the money the first weekend kind of thing? No. All right, let's pass on.
Mm.
So I started seeing the realities of the TV film industry, and it was a little daunting. And I hadn't gone to university, so I decided to apply to all the UCs while I was at DreamWorks, and I was doing part-time school at Pasadena City College.
Mm-hmm.
And I was encouraged by my now husband, Amos Cass, to apply to UC Berkeley, and I was like, I'm not going to get into that school, you're crazy. And he said, just apply, you never know. And I got into all the UCs I applied to. And I didn't get a full ride at UC Berkeley, but I got, some grants and some help. And the cool thing about UC Berkeley is that they don't ask you to pay back the loans until after you graduate, which
Mm.
I learned not all the UCs practice. So a little tip out there, UC Berkeley, if you get in, you don't have to pay them back until after you graduate. So that's why I chose them. And also it was a school where I could focus. And I majored in English, creative writing minor, and also
Mm.
mass performance minor. Because I did a little bit of performance arts at PCC too.
I'm assuming you moved up there.
I did, yeah.
So what was that like? You know, had you been up there before? Did you? And how does it relate to like the Los Angeles area?
It was really, it was liberating and it was really scary because I was already in my mid-20s, but
Mm.
it was a late transfer because I was working in the industry for a
Mm.
while. Um, but it was exciting, and I remember my boyfriend, now husband, like Amos, dropped me off with one of our best friends, John Kloppy, and um, for some reason my parents couldn't be there, my sister. I think everyone was working, everyone was hustling, and it was just they too could come and help me bring my stuff over. And it felt like I was becoming my own person for the first time because I didn't have family nearby.
Mm-hmm.
And not that I wasn't a person, with when I'm with my family, but it felt like, oh, if I make a choice now, it's on me. It's not like, la culpa de Jackie, que no me
Yeah.
or like, if my mom would have showed up on time, I would have made it here on time, I was getting a ride
Yeah.
somewhere, or it was all like now on my shoulders. And then in addition to that, I was the first one to attend university. And on top of that, I was the first one to attend such an important university. So I couldn't fuck it up. Sorry, big cuss. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine.
I couldn't mess it up. I couldn't mess up attending UC Berkeley. So it was a lot of pressure. It was liberating and also very scary.
And so, like, what was your experience of like attending that school, especially as like your mid-20s? You're an immigrant. You're sort of like you said, like stepping into your own like journey. Like, so what was it like up there?
I felt like I could do anything in terms of the school. I think I was already familiar with the institution, like in general, to
Mm.
know that this is it. You better like squeeze the juice out of this one. So I wandered around the whole school for a whole day, and the reason I became a dance minor, I think, is because I walked by Bangkok Studio, which is an old church, but it's now being used by the dance department, and there were
Mm.
drums like, and it was live, and I
Yeah.
could hear the teacher go, ah, 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 and I was like, it was like my heart, and it reminded me of like Peru. You walk by that door and you
Yeah.
hear music, and it was like, and you're alive, and every like pelito in my body would perk up, and I was like, oh my god, I have to be in this department somehow. And then I was already in English, so I went through the English program, and then I found out that Peter Chernin, who's the producer in Hollywood, had a writing program. Right when I got in 2010 into the campus, he just started his program,
Mm.
and it was peer workshop, so you could attend, and it was pretty much kind of a community meetup. So
Yeah.
students would gather and talk to other students in the same department. So then I would go to the professors, and I'm like, what else could I do with Chernin? And they're like, we're doing peer workshops. You could teach workshops. So I taught a short story workshop with the Chernin program, which was really cool. I joined the marketing committee, student marketing committee at Cal Performances. I became a dancer for Berkeley Dance Project with Theater Dance Performance Studies department. And then after I graduated from Cal, I used some of my filmmaking skills and worked on campus as a videographer and editor for some other departments. And it was a blast. It was a really good time. I miss my family, but in a different way. I think because I was a little older.
Mm.
One difference I would say is people who came straight from high school into the college will definitely go into the party scene a little bit harder.
Mm.
And I feel like I partied I'm not gonna lie, I partied a couple of times. But generally, I was like, let's go. Like, I have to make sure that this is the best
Yeah.
experience. And I studied abroad both summers because I only had 2 years there. Did a theater program in Ireland, so I got to work with Laura Dolis, the phenomenal acting teacher, Charlotte MacGyver,
Mm.
who is now teaching in Galway University. And then the second summer, I went to Paris just because one of my favorite authors, Cesar Vallejo, who's Peruano, moved to Paris and he died there. So I went to Paris and I visited his
Mm.
grave. And yeah, Berkeley was just a place for me where I hit the treadmill and
Yeah. Yeah, and you're totally right. Like, I went to college right after high school, and I feel like I literally I don't even know what I did with those 4 years. But you with just like a couple years like experience of working and like being in like all these like actual like grown-up environments, you come into like this school and you're just like, yeah, I'm gonna like, this is an opportunity. I should take it. I should grab everything I can. I'm paying tuition, so whatever's not nailed down, like, let me use it.
Yeah.
And yeah, you had sort of like the foresight to be like, this is important for what I'm gonna do later.
Yeah.
Instead of like how a lot of people just go and it's like daycare for like 18 and 19-year-olds, you know, or at least that was my experience. So yeah, so like I do want to ask about, you know, like where the writing came from, you know, like when did you first like start to write, and like how did you know that this was like something that you were good at and you maybe wanted to like pursue?
I've always had imposter syndrome when it comes to anything creative I do.
Mm-hmm.
And I would hear, if we were a room of 10 people, 9 people would tell me something was awesome. But if one person was like, that was it. That was the one voice I would hear.
Mm-hmm.
And so it would either, you know, break me or make me work harder, depending on the day.
Mm-hmm.
So I think another reason I'm going into this is because when I started to write, it was to survive. I started writing to remember.
Mm-hmm.
It was journals that are in my mom's house somewhere, journals of me being a 10-year-old when I could finally understand a little bit of English. I started journaling
Mm-hmm.
9 and 10, and it was all like Spanglish, ESL, like phonetic words of what happened at school. And somebody said this, I have a crush on that person.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a way for me to express myself because I was pretty much an introvert being an ESL. You know, people assume things when you're, especially back then. Now it's like, if you're bilingual, your brain is phenomenal and you're doing a lot of great stuff for yourself. You know, we send the kids to Mandarin immersion and Spanish
Oh
immersion.
yeah.
But back then it was like, oh, they're a little slow. Oh, there's something
Yeah.
wrong with this kid, you know, like, let's just be patient. So, sorry, my baby's crying. My mommy
That's
ear
okay.
there. So the writing became journaling, I would say, at first. Then as we got into high school, it became poetry writing. And then as I was in my 20s, it became poetry, essays, and songs. I had like this little phase where I was like walking around LA with my guitar and doing open mics with songs on microphone.
That's funny.
And then and through ICF and City Filmmakers, it also was screenwriting, doing short stories, short films.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I went to Berkeley, I learned more about theater and plays and other formats and other ways of expression through writing, and the importance and the value of communication in culture and also in entering community.
Mm-hmm.
So then it became more essay, it became like a novel. Then I remembered, I was like, oh man, all of these journals I have, they're like a novel. And so I started looking through my things, and I found a short story that I wrote, and I was like, this is it, this is my novel idea, and I have to finish my novel. And one of the reasons why I left DreamWorks was because hearing all those people being rejected, all those amazing stories that I had written, I said, what opportunity am I going to get as a brown girl in this industry if, you know, John Smith's not getting in with this really cool play, or sorry, script,
Yeah.
because it's not going to sell as much in the first weekend. What chance do I have? I'm going to become a writer, a novelist.
Mm.
So Berkeley was also kind of an escape out of the industry. And and then it was not. Then I came back eventually. But that's what my writing life has been like. And I met this artist called Paloma McGregor as I was doing research assistant work for a professor on campus after I graduated. And she came with the Urban Bush Women Leadership Institute because some really racist situation happened in the theater department. There was a play called Ishi, the last of the oh my gosh, what was the tribe? I forget. There was a really racist play called Ishi at the theater department, at Berkeley, and the Urban Bush Women Leadership Institute showed up, kind of to fix community and start a dialogue about why it's wrong to do plays and work about certain communities without involving them in the process.
Yeah.
Engage them. And Berkeley had a rich Native American community, and no one had been talked to. And I was the first year at Berkeley, I lived the Native American themed program. It was like a residential space that I could live in to learn about it. And so I knew some of the community members, not all of them, but some. So I would go to them and I said, hey, the theater department's doing this play about Ishi. Have you heard about it? And they're like, no. And so the word spread also through other people, and they went to see the play, and it was really offensive. They had Latino students doing cartwheels and loincloths. They had like a flying penis at some point of the play. Okay. And it wasn't to move the story forward. It was very sensational and offensive. So then Urban Bush Women came and they did kind of this community performance experience, and I was put into the writing group. And I think that's when it percolated for me that I could write for the stage. And Wilma gave me an opportunity to write a piece. And I didn't know at the time, I think it felt like a writing exercise, but I opened the show actually with my story. And the show was called From the Field to the Table. It was all about food and how it connects us as a people in various communities. So I talked about my immigrant journey with my mother and how the food connected us to our roots in Peru, no matter how far we were from it. So it's been in my life. Writing has been in my life. It's been a healing experience, and it's been like a...
Yeah. I mean, that's the best kind of writing, you know? It's like that thing where you like can release something you've been carrying the whole time. Yeah. And if you're lucky, other people are like, oh, wait, that's like, I relate to that. You're like, what? Like, I thought it was just me that had like all this like stuff, you know? I always like describe it to people like, it's like you reach inside you grab the gunk, you slam it on the table, and then you're like, there it is. Like let's talk about it. Let's like, here, I am releasing it. It's not mine. You guys look at it, you know?
Yeah.
But yeah, it is good to like, because you know, you're telling your story, you're telling your truth, so it's like, it's a thing that where you release it and you're ready to talk about it because that's why you're writing about it, you know? Yeah, so where are you now with your writing?
Well, right now, I'm in process, I would say. And I'm working with a web series called LA, and I believe you interviewed Chris Castillo. He and Sebastian Hernandez brought me on to work with the character Rita Montes. She's undocumented and a woman, and so that's been really cool, really fun. We've been in rewriting mode. So through that process, I'm learning a lot about like what it would feel like to be in a writing room and how to like teach ideas and share information. So that's been really great. Also working by myself on a sci-fi project, and it's untitled. It's a young girl. She's an immigrant, and she's just a badass. And I'm still developing her, and I'm still developing the world. And I'm trying to be sensitive to what's happening right now in this country and in other parts of the world with children. But it surrounds. She's just a hero, and she helps children. So I feel like there's such vulnerable people right now.
Yeah. And what would you say is like the themes that you find in your writing? You know, I always say like, are you always writing the same story like over and over? Like what is the sort of stuff that you see? Like if there's a through line between it all?
You know, Josefina says that. She's also a board member at Casa 0101 Theater, and I've taken classes with Josefina Lopez. And she says, you know, we're always writing the same story because we're always healing it, this wound that we have. And if I were to say a style, I would say, someone who's surviving, someone who fights back, someone who's about justicia, even if it's not pretty, getting the justice. And it's immigrant stories. I've tried to be like, I'm gonna disassociate myself from immigrant stories, and I have a few pieces, like short plays that have come up and are non about immigrant stories.
Yeah.
But generally, my heart gravitates towards that.
Yeah, and I feel like it's the same thing too. Like, it's like once you've been an immigrant, it's like part of your DNA. Like, it's really hard to like.
It's fair.
Yeah, especially because it's such a like untapped subject. Also, like I always say, like there's so much talk about immigration on TV, but no one knows anything about it.
Yeah.
And the people that have really experienced it, like, are the people who are less at the forefront to like actually say what the hell's going on.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, I was excited to talk to Cruz about LA. Looking forward to everything you're coming up with. There's a part where I asked like my guests sort of who are the writers that they are liking. These could be heroes of yours, these could be your peers, this could be people you just see online that you're like have crushes on just because they do such great things.
I'm gonna say I'm part of this writing group. I wrote down our name because it's super long, and I'm like, I can't believe you chose this name. We're called Goals. We came out of like a NALI workshop at Gloria Calderon Kellett, and it's just a group of us who got together and we're like, let's meet up as writers, and we just jive. We have good vibe together. So then we came up with a name in our group, and we're called the Group of Associated or Aspiring, whichever you choose, LatinX. So in that group, there are a few writers who I admire profusely, and Victor Dueñas is one of them. Because he's a comedic writer, but he's also he's very empathetic to other writers in the space and their process. And he's just a funny writer. His stories are really, really awesome. And I'm not going to, I can't share what he writes about because they're all being pitched here and there. Love Victor. But, yeah, he has a very clear voice, and I love that. When someone's specific, it actually teaches me something about myself. And because I've been through so much, I think I'm very general at times. So when I meet people who are very specific with their writing, heart explodes with joy. The other one in the group is Susana Drisi, and she's a professor at UCLA. And she just started doing this pilot, and it became this thing where she just would always come with her pilot to the meetings. And it was wonderful. And she felt like, I'm always bringing stuff, guys. I'm sorry. But for me, as like somebody who's trying to get back to TV or film writing even, it's exciting to see someone, who's such an established author herself outside of TV writing, see her like going through the process of going into screenwriting. It's super great. Her ideas are phenomenal. She challenges the space in a beautiful way.
Oh.
And authors that I usually read and admire, Haruki Murakami, 1284 is one of my favorite books of his. Octavia Butler, I just got introduced to her, and she's Kindred is the book I read. It was jaw-dropping, and it was part of my research for my sci-fi project. And I'm like, wow, anything is possible after I read that. And I stopped judging myself a little bit less because of her writing. And then Cesar Vallejo, who I mentioned earlier, because he's Peruano, and from my country, and also from my dad's land in Trujillo. And his writing is super dark, and dark comedy. And he died in Paris. He died kind of poor, but he had a life, and people love him.
Yeah. And, speaking of like Nalip, I saw that you went.
Yes.
I saw, and then you're working on LA and all this stuff. And I also know that, you're a new mom.
Yeah.
So, like, can you just explain to, especially me, who I'll never really know what it's like to, like, be a pregnant woman and, like, have to do everything I'm supposed to do and then care for a child and birth it and nurse it? Like, what's that like to, like, be doing all these other things and then, like, having, like, a whole person you have to also take care of? Like, how have you been, like, what's been your experience of that?
Yeah, it hasn't been easy, but I have support. My husband Enos also freelances, so we're able to take turns with baby.
Mm.
Um, I mean TMI, but I pump milk, so there's like breast milk for him in the fridge. And when I come home, I had midwife tell me, you'll eventually be away from baby at times, and that's going to get a little sad at first, but the most important part is the reunion. So whenever you come home, like, how are you going to make that reunion the most beautiful?
Mm.
And it always is. Like, I walk in the door and I'm like, and he smiles at me, and we cuddle,
Yeah.
and, roll around the ground, and then sometimes I take him with me. Sometimes I ask permission, like short and sweet.
I saw that. Yes.
So it's like, hey y'all, so my baby's kind of chill, and if he makes noise, I can sneak out. And he was pretty chill. The only thing that happened during the auditions is he farted during someone's monologue.
Oh my God.
And his farts were really little, but what probably was more boisterous was my laughter, so I had to step
Yeah.
away.
Yeah. No, because I saw that. I saw that you took the baby with you. But yeah, I saw that you. I was like, yes, like bring the baby. Like I feel like just from what I've seen, it's like we there's like this like shame that moms feel like, oh, sorry, I have to bring the baby, or like, is it okay? And
Right.
I like that you were like, we're just like, this is the reality. I am a mom. I have a baby, but I'm still a director, so I'm gonna be here to see the auditions. Like, like I feel like we have to like adjust. Like we should be adjusting our frame of thinking with that instead of like, to be more exclusive to moms instead of like being
Yeah.
like, well, you can't do that. It's like, well, why not?
Yeah, and my mom's, way of thinking was like, oh my god, after I gave birth, I didn't leave my bed for 40 days. Like, hey, I'm on the Peruvian 40, los 40. You just stay there. And I'm like, I can't do that. That's not in my nature.
Yeah.
And I was directing when I was pregnant, and, I was directing Carlos Sanchez and Terry Angeles and Hermanos last year. Moses Rodriguez wrote it at Teatro Piracalo. And my little kid was just like kicking and like experiencing the play through my feelings.
Hmm.
It was really cool. Like, some of the scenes were hard, but the baby felt it, and then I would have to like breathe and relax because
Yeah.
I get moved by actors and performers, and so I knew he was feeling that, and I was like, it's okay, it's just okay.
Yeah.
We would both relax.
And, because I was like part of Browning Out last summer. And, with any of the processes with our directors, with our writers, with our actors, I never wanted to be like let's not make sure it's not a space where a mom would be like nervous to like ask, oh, is it okay if I bring my kid? Is it okay if like I have to leave early or come late? Like that's like the little things that like people don't think about it. It's like, well, yeah, we want to make sure that like being a mom, which like a lot of people are, isn't an obstacle to like, you know, because I think a lot of that work does come down to the moms like picking up, getting dinner ready, and all that stuff. And that's what I've noticed about Casa. I see a lot of like badass moms who are
Yeah.
like doing it all.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
have to, and I don't, and part of me, it's part of the hustle in me that I get from my mom too. It's like I don't. It's not that I have a fear of FOMO. It's that I know myself enough that if I let myself become complacent, it could be quiet for a long time. Like I can move to
Yeah.
the forest and you will never
Yeah.
see me again. And I know I have that in me, so I'm like, maybe I just need to keep working at it because my goal is to be staffed on a show someday. Somebody needs an immigrant experience, maybe, with goals working towards that and getting better at the craft, little by
Yeah.
little.
Yeah. And then maybe putting in like a daycare right next to your office.
Yeah, or eventually getting a nanny. It's all hard
Yeah.
because I'm freelance, but eventually it'll
Yeah.
happen.
Yeah. So yeah, let's talk about that play you are directing for Short and Sweet. If just whatever you feel comfortable sharing.
Yeah, it's called A Paz Girl, translated to Daddy's Girl, and it's written by Elia Susana Rubalcaba. She's a dear friend of mine, and I met her through the Chicanas Cholas y Chisme Play Festival at Casa Serrano Serrano Theater. A beautiful play about a woman who's in denial and about her aging father, and it's just a journey of her defending him, being in denial, and then being confronted with reality by the end of the piece. It's funny, it's sweet, but it's also real.
Yeah, I've seen a couple of plays written by her. Like, I always could pick it out every time I see like a group of them. I'm like, oh yeah, that's hers. Like, phenomenal writer.
Another specific writer.
Yeah,
like, she's got her voice down.
Yeah.
She writes every day. Her ritual is.
Oh God, jealous.
Yeah.
Well, it shows. It shows. She does phenomenal work. And yeah, I did want to ask. You just mentioned you're on the board of Casa. Like, how did you get involved with them? How did you decide to be on the board?
Yeah. Well, I first was introduced with Casa 0101 Theater through La Peña Cultural Center in the Bay Area. I did a show there called Filmmakers. And they were like, we have a sister theater in LA since you're moving to LA again. And I'm like, yeah, I need to get back to writing, so what better way than to go into a space that teaches screenwriting and playwriting and all the things that I want to do again. So went into a playwriting class, then I heard about a casting opportunity for a show called Drunk Girl, and I'm also an actor. So I auditioned and I got in and met amazing, talented actors who are now still my friends. And then I did various other shows there, like Teatramos and Inside Queer Stories and Beauty and the Beast.
Yeah.
That was so fun. I got to use some of my friends from summer abroad program in that show. And then I think Emmanuel Deliage, I think he started to see that aside from me being a performer and also going to the classes, I would talk about Casa or promote a show on the Instagram or bring people or refer a class to someone and but it wasn't just what they said is that we welcome board members who are not in it just for themselves, who are kind of like the cave. Once you go out into the light, that short story.
Oh yeah.
Go out into the light, make sure to come back and grab another and bring them out to the light. So it was one of those where I was like, man, this is so good for me. It could be good for you too.
Yeah, and that's a great thing about Casa. Like, once you sort of get involved into it, like, it's like so cool that you're just like, I want to tell everybody about it. Like, you want to share it, bring them in.
And they have a phenomenal youth program, acting, performing program. I was involved with the film. They had a youth film program for 2 years running, and we did short films with the students. It was really great.
All right, now sort of to wrap up the interview, first, how can people find you? What's your social media?
Oh, okay. You can find me on Instagram or Twitter at Miss Peru, and that's MIZPERU, or arroba Miss Peru, MIZPERU. And I also have a blog/website, and it's rosalnavarrete.blogspot.com. Someday I'll get into the website, but for now that's the one that works.
Yeah. So the last question I ask everybody is to help me title the episode. This is really just a prompt to so when I post it motivates people to want to listen, just in the sense that they're like, oh, that person's like me, that's my story too, let me listen and connect and find lessons learned and shared experiences. So the prompt is a blank Latinx writer. So in that blank you can put in more than one word. You can move them around. Just something that you feel like encompasses your story, the type of writing you do, or even just what you're feeling from the conversation. Yeah.
I wrote one down because I saw that you were going to ask that. It came from the word percolating. I feel like I'm boiling as a writer right now. And I think Alex Alfaro, we met up one time and he said this about me, and he was like, I feel like you're getting ready for something. Something is going to happen. And I was like, really? Because I feel that too. Thank you so much. I don't know. Something's happening. So it was affirming. I really love Alex. He's got such a good soul. So I started thinking about percolating and boiling, and then I was like, okay, I'm going to write this, and hopefully it's not redundant, but if it is, whatever. It's brewing with excitement, Peruana immigrant LatinX writer.
Well, I do want to thank you so much for being on the podcast and, spending your time. I know it's not easy to get a couple hours in with a new baby, so thank you for...
Thank you, Ruben. Thank you for doing this. And I said it before you started recording, but I'm going to say it now. So it's on record. Thank you so much for starting this podcast, because there was a need out there for this, and you took that opportunity, and it's just gonna, you're bringing people out of the cave, in your own way. So thank you.
Yeah, well, I appreciate it. I'm gonna accept the compliment. Thank you so much. People know where to find you, hit you up, follow you, see what boils over. I'll see everybody next week with a brand new episode of La Lista. Follow us on Instagram at La Lista Podcast. Rate, subscribe, review. And that's it for this episode. So bye, everybody.